perspective of what makes the difference between all of these. It's the people they surround them with, their influences, their mentors, their coaches, then their family members a lot of the time. You know, the passion they have for what they're doing. No one's ever been the best in the world at doing something they're not passionate about. And that still hasn't been shown. And then the third is the process to get there. Without those three areas, it's impossible to truly reach maximum ability. So that's one of the things you've got to ask yourself, again, is am I paying the price and am I following those three things? Do I have the right people around me to advise and to guide? You know, do I have the passion for what I'm doing, and do I have the process in place? If we can touch on those three things regularly, we're definitely going to make a bigger impact than what we're doing today. And that's all we're asking for. We're not asking for perfection, we're asking for bigger impact from our perspective. From a performance sciences standpoint, which is sort of the area I spend most of the time in, there's a lot of things that can help from a perspective of little things that you do. All the basics that everyone knows here that just doesn't do it well enough needs to revisit that as much as possible. But then there's a lot of other things that are a lot sexier, a lot more interesting, and probably more entertaining to sort of hear from. If I said eat better, sleep better, train harder, recover better, you'd be like, yeah, I've heard that all before. But that's really all that really matters. That's the 99%. The 1% we can talk about a little bit, which is, are there things that increase energy? Is there a pill? Is there a formula? Is there a tablet that can increase energy? And there are a few things. I mean, you've got a few things that work. Caffeine does work. The research is clear. It works well. You need to know how to take it. And you need to know when to take it, and you need to know how it may impact other factors. There's other things such as inorganic nitrates, which some of you may have heard of. It's either celery juice or beetroot juice or things like that. That's been around for probably 7 or 8 years. It increases blood flow. Increasing blood flow increases your ability to perform work at less intensity. So from a standpoint of endurance, you improve your endurance. So those are some things that are very easy, very safe, very legal to do. From a standpoint of how you train, from a standard standpoint of a tennis player, all of you play points a certain way. It's anywhere between an ace, which is 0 seconds, to 25 to 30 seconds for the longest point you'll ever play. The question is, how do you train? When you're on court, how are your drills structured? Are you doing 5-minute drills, 7-minute drills, 20-minute drills without much rest? How does that impact how you play? You've got to ask yourself those questions. Are we doing the best we can to improve the performance based on the information that we have? So it's very, very important that we don't just do things because we've always done them. That's probably the worst reason ever to do anything, is because it's always been done that way. And that gets us all into a lot of problems. Typically doing things for the reasons that make sense and that you have a justification and a theoretical reasoning behind is going to provide better results than just doing something because I either saw someone else do it or I was told to do it and that was why I did it. Ask yourself those questions. As players, you've got smart coaches. You've got to ask your coaches, why are we doing this? What's the reasoning behind it? Let them justify it. They all have a very clear path of why they do everything they do with you. So have that discussion and learn from yourself. So really very, very important factors that really do contribute significantly from that area. One of the things when I spoke in Egypt actually during the Tahrir Square uprising, the week of the uprising, I flew into Cairo, which is kind of stupid. But the event was scheduled a year and a half out, and when we left Atlanta, there was no real issues, it was just regular protests. When we landed, there wasn't anything major, they just said you can't go into the city. So that didn't seem that unusual, there was a lot of issues going on. But the conference was actually on the coast, so we had to get a bus that was taken to the event, which is about 2.5 hours away. The problem was once we got there, everything else was shut down, so we couldn't actually leave the location. We couldn't fly in, we couldn't fly out, we were stuck there for multiple days. But one of the things from that standpoint, which is interesting, because I was there at a conference that had individuals from 140 countries, not that dissimilar to a room like this, a lot of different nations, a lot of different folks there. But one of the things that was discussed significantly across those countries was what it takes to get to the next level, because this was all about high performance and individuals reaching maximum ability. And the countries and the cultures made very little difference. The concepts were the same across the different countries and across the different cultures. And it was all about the things we've talked about tonight: paying the price, understanding a process that you have in place, and then following that to the best of your ability. The biggest thing though was being willing to fail multiple times. And that came across as the messaging of the event, was all these folks that made it to the highest levels of what they were trying to accomplish had failed way more times than other people that hadn't. Meaning that they tried, they pushed their envelope, they pushed their ceiling to try to get better from day to day. If you're trying to push the edge, you're always going to fail. That's part of getting to the edge. One of the best physiologists I've ever learned under has done 6 Olympic Games for the US Olympic Committee. And the first year of a quadrennial is the year after the Olympics. And that's the year where you make or break an athlete from a standpoint of understanding where their limits are. You typically break them, that's the concept. You take them to the edge and you take them over the edge, because you have 3 years to recover. You have 3 years to understand where their limit is and how you're going to get very close to that without going over the edge in the last year. So it's a very interesting concept that you need to understand where your limits are, get very close to them. Potentially you go over them if you're trying to be the best, because you don't know where your limit is until you get there. And that's where you've got to trust in the process, trust in the information you're getting, and commit to it on a regular basis. So it's one of those factors that really is hard to do. Not many of us actually have the ability, desire to actually push us to that limit. But if you want to be great at anything, whether it's here on the tennis court, whether it's after, in your careers, in your professional life, in your personal life, you're going to have to push the limits sometimes. And that's the hardest part of what we all do, is figuring out how hard can we push and how consistently can we push. Again, fortunate to be around a number of number 1 players in the world in the sport of tennis, and there's a difference. And the players in here and the coaches in here that have played at a high level, that have played against some of these folks, know it. It's very clearly defined. There's a mindset there that is not normal. They're 100% outliers. A lot of folks are way above average. Everyone in here is way above average. But those that are 4, 5, 6 degrees away, so standard deviations away from the mean, are complete outcasts, outliers. They do things completely different. I'll give you an example of one former number 1 who told a great story about changing rackets. And a lot of you change rackets regularly. So the purpose was, at the time, going to a slightly longer frame. And that's not that uncommon. People add half an inch or an inch, get the longer frame. And this player was a great baseliner, predominantly. Controlled the court, aggressive from both sides, and got more power on the serve, more power on the forehand, more power across the board, greater reach, all positives. But there was one stroke that had negatively impacted, and it was a cross-court backhand. And the problem with that was the game plan. The game plan was to take the opponent out wide with the cross-court backhand, to get them out of position and then dictate the court from that point. So even though they improved their serve, they improved their forehand, their one shot that actually helped them start the point and dictate the pattern of play so they were in the right position was worse because of the shift in frame. So they had to make the call. Do you go to this bigger frame or do you not? And that's what some of those greats do. They look at the entire picture and say, even though 4 out of these 5 things were better, the one thing that wasn't had more impact on my success than those 4 other things. And that's what you have to all decide, is what are these factors I'm going to make changes with and what aren't? What's going to make the big impact and what's not? So I just want to leave you all with just some final thoughts from the standpoint of a former player. I want to say War Eagle and Roll Tide. My schools, and I hope they go far this week. I want to definitely thank all the organisers of the tournament, because this is a truly amazing event, and you won't realise till you're multi-years into your career how valuable your time here was. I want to thank everyone involved, the coaches especially, for putting this event on the schedule, because you have a lot of options. It's kind of like the airlines. You have many options. Thank you for flying with us. It's a really important thing to be here for the city, for the folks involved, and for the history of the event. So I just want to leave everyone with this concept of, you're in a great sport. It's the greatest sport in the world. You can impact thousands of people, sometimes millions of people, with what you do and how many interactions you'll have through tennis. Majority of my connections, both personally and professionally, have come through tennis. And the biggest thing is enjoy the ride. And remember, if you really do want to be the best, you have to pay the price. So thank you all.